Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off talking about Game Boy Advance emulation on Windows, Mac, and Linux with Hades, and Hades just got its first official release. So the developer says after 3 years of work, Hades is finally ready to get its first official release. Here's a short summary of all of the features this first release provides. A complete emulation of the Game Boy Advance, with the exception of most external devices and add-ons. Decent accuracy, game controller support, keys and buttons remapping, quick saves, also known as save states, real-time clock support, color correction and LCD effects, loading game from common archive formats like 7-zip, zip, and even more. And as for what's next, the developer says, I will now focus my efforts on performance, accuracy, and providing support for more video effects and new external devices. Hades is 100% free, it's open source, it's available on GitHub, and at the time of filming version 1.0.0 is the latest update. It's the first update. I'll drop a link to it in the description below and feel free to check it out. Moving on, and we're talking about Nintendo Switch emulation on PC and Android with Yuzu. And Yuzu just dropped their progress report for January. I'll drop a link to it in the description below. I recommend checking it out as it's well written. There's a lot of information in it and we're just covering it at a high level. Now, we've talked about some of this stuff in previous videos, but the report mentions that Blinkhawk implemented device memory mapping emulation and rewrote the GPU implementation with support for the SMMU. SMMU stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or System Memory Management Unit, depending on how you want to interpret that. Anyways, at a high level here, some of the main benefits are increased accuracy, reduced video memory usage, testing shows around a 300 megabyte reduction. It enables multi-process use of the GPU, and it leaves room for potential future optimizations. There was a ton of work done around multi-processes and also applets. And they say here they're able to load the native controller applet among others and have fun with it. There was a fix implemented to get the Battle Cats Unite past the starting loading screen. Time tracking was fixed in Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Quest. There's also an interesting PSA. They say if Yuzu has recently started showing Microsoft as the GPU vendor for you, and you can no longer play any game, uninstall the package named OpenCL, OpenGL, and Vulkan Compatibility Pack. Or if you prefer to keep it, go to Emulation, Configure Graphics and Device, and change the GPU to your correct model without Microsoft Direct 3D12 at the start of its name. There was some work done to stop some crashing with MK11 on mobile devices. Unfortunately, the game is still not playable. Also for Android, they implemented support for custom screen orientation, and there's now 7 different orientation styles. In my opinion, on Android, this is a pretty big quality of life feature. They've added the option to uninstall any add-on. For example, updates, DLCs, mods, and cheats. If you've added something that has screwed up your game, it's pretty easy to remove it. On top of that, for quality of life features, you can now verify the integrity of your game and also content. When you're playing a game and if you bring up the in-game menu frequently, you've now got the option to lock it so you don't accidentally bring it up. They've added a pop-up to let users know encryption keys are missing, if encryption keys are missing. And they've added support for multi-program app switching, which helps out bundled games like Super Mario 3D All-Stars. On top of all of that, there's some great stuff in here talking about lossless scaling, fluid motion, and even more. And as for what's next, they're working on emulating the Switch launcher, meaning booting games right from this launcher, closing them, suspending them, and launching a different game. The Yuzu development team had an absolutely stellar start to 2024, and I can't wait to see what's next. These developers have been working overtime to accomplish a whole lot. Moving on, and we're talking about Wine, and Wine version 9.2 just dropped and brings about a very important fix if you like to play GameCube and Wii games. And that is fixing Dolphin emulator that was crashing using more recent versions. It appears the problem was affecting some users who are trying to launch Dolphin with controllers connected, and that's now been fixed. Next up, if you've got an Android device with a Snapdragon CPU, and you use custom drivers and emulators like Yuzu, Vita 3K, Citra, and even more, You might be excited to know there's brand new Mesa Turnip drivers available. Revision 17 just dropped. This one's got Vulkan bumped to version 1.3.277 and may result in improved performance for you, may not. It's also worth noting Adreno 750 support is not merged to the source yet, so they've included a separate driver for Adreno 750 users. Next up, we're quickly talking about Linux and bazzite OS, and if you've got a Lenovo Legion Go, bazzite OS now supports it. In my opinion, this one's pretty big. They say that the Lenovo Legion Go is now feature complete as of the latest update. This means that you can now enjoy full feature parity with the Steam Deck on your Lenovo Legion Go. Next up, if you're on Windows, you may be excited to know that Retrobat just got a very big update. So at the time of filming, version 6.0 is the latest update, and there's a massive amount of bug fixes, a whole bunch of core updates, and also some improvements here, including fixing gun support on multiple emulators like PCSX2, RPCS3, Flycast, and even more. They've added a menu to manage gun options and even more here. And RetroArch has been updated to version 1.16. For those who may not be aware, Retrobat is designed to automatically configure emulation stations front end with RetroArch and other standalone emulators, and it can be used in portable mode. Next up here, I've got a couple of YouTube videos you may want to check out if you like the N64 or you just like learning stuff. I'll drop both in the description below. The first one here is called How We Beat the Limitations That Define the N64's Art Style. And this one goes over a detailed explanation on how to get better graphics out of the N64. In my opinion, if these techniques were applied back in the day, we'd have some mind-blowing stuff. I mean, it's mind-blowing now. Now, this second video is for a game that's not on the N64. For some reason, I think I said it was. Anyways, here it's for Super Mario Sunshine, and if you were ever wondering about the mysterious text, it has now been decoded. Someone found the actual alphabet here, and while the wording isn't necessarily earth-shattering or anything super secret, at the same time it's pretty cool. The third video here takes you back a few generations from the N64 back to the NES. And someone has Linux up and running on the NES. Overall, this one is pretty interesting, but don't expect the NES to be able to accomplish a whole lot. It's fairly underpowered. And the last video here shifts us from Nintendo to Sega. And someone found an entire ant colony living in their Sega Dreamcast controller. This one is wild. Surprisingly, the ants didn't do any damage to the controller. In fact, the ants kind of cleaned up after themselves when they were being relocated from the controller. Next up, we're talking about Dead Cells, and you may or may not be aware that Dead Cells is stopping updates after update number 35. And this apparently is not sitting well with the designer of Dead Cells. Now, it's worth pointing out there are two statements on the matter, the original statement and the revised statement, and no surprise, the original statement is getting all of the attention, and this is the original statement here. Basically, at a high level, it's complaining about the company and the fact that there are greedy people there, and that's the reason for the cancellation. Feel free to pause the video if you wanted to read through the whole thing. And the revised statement provides a lot more detail and context, and I'd argue is worded a little less harshly. I'll drop a link to both in the description below and feel free to check them out. Next up, we're quickly talking about MAME on Android with MAME4 Droid 2024, and this one just got a small update. So if we take a look right on the Google Play Store page, they say they've added media scraping. So if you've got a whole bunch of games, you may like this feature. And last up here, we're talking about Android with not Win Now, but Win Later. And this is Windows emulation on Android, and Winlator just got a brand new development build. This one may be buggy, there may be issues with it, but at the same time here, it may be a little bit better than their previous version. The developer advises that it is for testing only, and Winlator has been receiving a whole lot of updates lately, almost every week or two. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and one fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.